Hello, welcome back to my channel. And first of all, I will apologize in advance if you can hear construction noise happening in the background. There is drilling happening somewhere in the apartment block, so I apologize for that in advance. But I had to come on and just chat about this Mattia Binotto situation. I'm also going to have a look back at my 2022 season predictions that I did in January of this year because Ferrari were a part of them. So I figured we may as well bundle it all together. I will chat about what I thought was going to happen when I made this video originally back in January, and I'll link that up here if you want to watch that afterwards, and you can see how right or wrong I was. Now, it is worth mentioning that I did not look at Red Bull or Mercedes when I made that original prediction video because I genuinely felt that with the resources and the resources that those teams have, I genuinely felt that they would not feel the brunt of these 2022 regulation changes as heavily as the others, and that they would essentially be able to ride them out and maintain a strong level of performance and keep them at the top of the grid. Now, to an extent, that was true, and to another extent, it wasn't. Obviously, with Red Bull, very true, they dominated. Not so much with Mercedes, clearly started off on a very poor footing, were essentially bottom of the pile. And then obviously by the end of the season, we're able to move up and get that win. So they will not be included, but there are three other teams that I did chat about in that video. Before we get into it though, please make sure that you like and subscribe. I am on a mission, as some of you will know, to hit 500 subscribers by the end of the year to activate YouTube's community feature. That way I can go live with you all for races in 2023, which I'm very excited to do. So make sure you hit that subscribe button before we get into this Mattia Binotto chat. So as many of you will know, the rumour mill has been churning for the last couple of weeks with regard to Mattia Binotto's position as team principal at Ferrari. And in fact, on the 15th of November, Ferrari released a statement on their social media essentially saying that the rumours that they were seeing about his position were without foundation, and I quote. Now, today, as I'm filming this, is the 29th of November, so just 2 weeks later, Ferrari have confirmed that Mattia Binotto will be relieved of his position as team manager on the 31st of December. So he is out. And I can't say that I am sad to see him go. I think that's the right decision. However, do I think that this decision will solve all of Ferrari's problems regardless of who they put in next? Absolutely not. And that is because although he has been the figurehead for a disappointing season, I don't believe that all of the blame for the mismanagement, the poor strategy, the operational errors can all be put at Mattia Binotto's door. It doesn't make sense. And I think there are larger systemic issues within Ferrari that need solving. Now, perhaps the removal of Binotto is the start of that process. We don't know, and we will have to wait and see whether that is the case. But for now, what we do know is that despite having a car that clearly had the potential to challenge for a world championship in 2022, Ferrari ended up with just 4 wins out of the season, and they had huge reliability issues. So they just weren't matching up reliability and performance. And in addition to that, they obviously had all those mistakes that were made during the season as well. Some admittedly by the drivers, which they did own, a lot by the team. Bad strategy calls, as I said, poor operational performance, and Mattia Binotto remained steadfast throughout all of it, not in a sense that he was saying, okay, hand up, we made some mistakes and you know, we're going to improve. In a lot of scenarios, he came on for his post-race interviews and said that strategy calls had been made correctly when clearly they weren't. So, you know, he was trying to show his loyalty, I suppose, and, you know, be a buffer, protect the rest of the team, but it didn't work out well. And he has been at Ferrari since 1995, so he's truly a stalwart, and this is a big decision for the team to let him go. But I think it is the right one ultimately, as I said, as part of a larger change that needs to take place. Now, Ross Brawn is being touted as a potential replacement for Binotto, clearly a legend in F1 circles, but I don't know if at this stage of his career he is going to want to go back to managing a team full time, especially with the volume of races that do happen now on a yearly basis. So either way, we're going to have to wait patiently to find out who is going to replace Mattia Binotto. But as I mentioned, I also included them in my F1 predictions for 2022 as one of the teams that would make the most out of these regulation changes that came in at the beginning of this year. As I said, clearly for the reasons that we've just chatted about, they didn't meet the potential that they started off the season with, and that was unfortunate. I think, we saw how frustrated both Charles and Carlos, particularly Charles, got with many of the decisions that were made. We had that infamous finger waving, wagging photo, not one of their finest moments, but I think let's hope that this is the start of some change for Ferrari, some positive change, and some just living up to the expectations that they set for their fans, the long-suffering Tifosi. But as I say, we will have to wait and see. Another team that I predicted would make the most out of these regulation changes in 2022 was McLaren, and I didn't really get that right, did I? Let's be honest. I was thinking, hoping that Lando would build on his, momentum from 2021, and that Daniel Ricciardo would kind of overcome his issues with the car, that he would bed in better to the team and to the car and feel more at one. But it just didn't happen. And it was really unfortunate to see. And they finished fifth ultimately in the Constructors' Championship with, the unfortunate result of that being that they finished behind their kind of direct competitors, Alpine, which means less resources and less development help, I suppose, and funding for them, which is unfortunate because they do need it. But it has to be said that they finished fifth behind Alpine, while a lot of the time the two Alpines were scrapping each other on track, and it's just not a good position for McLaren to be in. Meanwhile, Lando and Daniel finished 7th and 11th respectively in the Drivers' Championship, and ultimately, of course, Daniel Ricciardo ended up leaving McLaren in really kind of just sad circumstances and unfortunate circumstances, and is now back at Red Bull as a third driver. And Lando, I mean, after a very exciting season in 2021 where he got, 4 podiums and came painfully close to that win in Sochi, it just didn't happen for him in 2022. He managed to pull out 1 podium, but he also had 2 retirements and just a lot of non-races. And I think, again, looking at potential versus performance there, it just didn't come together for him with the car. So Daniel's struggle, meanwhile, only worsened from 2022. I think at least in that year he had that kind of magic unexpected win at Monza, but that really is by far and away the highlight of his time at McLaren. And I don't think, as much as he enjoyed, I think, the team and being teammates with Lando and the people that he worked with, it must have been really difficult for him to see that lack of performance from himself, based on how exciting of a driver he has been in the past. And we'll have to wait and see what happens with him now in that third driver position at Red Bull. In terms of where they ended up in the Drivers' Championship, as I said earlier, in 5th position, it's actually the worst performance for McLaren since in the last 5 years. And add to that the whole Oscar Piastri saga, and it just sort of was a non-year really for them. Not a huge amount of positive headlines. However, as I said, you would hope with Piastri in that second seat now, and with Lando having all the potential that he does have and the talent that he does have, that they will be able to give those two drivers a car that can take them much further and much, much faster up the grid in 2023. All right, third and final prediction that I made was that Alpine would perform well with these 2022 regulation changes. Now, I'm kind of 50-50 on this one. I wasn't great up there with the other two, but I was kind of 50-50 on this one because their season was not awful by any means. You know, we saw some exciting racing. We saw we saw the fourth place championship, constructors championship finish versus McLaren in fifth. So they beat out their closest rivals there. And, you know, they also managed a brace of top five finishes. And as I said, some exciting battles. The unfortunate thing was that many times the battles were amongst each other, and that dynamic duo partnership that we saw in 2021 that looked really promising for this year, it sort of just fell apart, and it became more of an infighting situation. And, you know, sometimes that can be productive for a team, but in this scenario, unfortunately, it wasn't. And I think particularly Fernando Alonso, you know, obviously he ended up leaving the team to go to Aston Martin next year, so it's clear how large his frustrations were, but I think they were significantly larger than those of Esteban Ocon. You know, Fernando took the brunt of the reliability issues at Alpine this year. He had 5 retirements in total and 2 bottom 5 finishes, which it's not where Fernando Alonso wants to be racing, and it wasn't quite as bad for Esteban Ocon. He actually managed to be relatively consistent with his performances, and I think even that difference in performance, you know, wouldn't have helped with the frustrations on Alonso's side of the garage. Let's see what next year will bring for Alpine. You know, will they be able to make the most of that extra cash that they earned by coming fourth in the Constructors' Championship this year and really give their drivers a car that they can, you know, continue to battle with the middle of the grid and be kind of top of best of the rest there, if you will, and potentially even close the gap to the top 3 teams. We will have to wait and see. We'll also have to wait and see if sparks fly between fellow countrymen and now fellow teammates Pierre Gasly and Esteban Ocon. That's been kind of potentially blown up out of proportion, but we'll have to wait and see how it plays out on track. I'm very interested to see how that dynamic is going to work. Thank you for tuning in as always. Please do drop a comment down below and let me know who you think the top 3 teams are going to be in terms of who makes the most improvements next year. Obviously, we are very, very, very early on in the development phase so far. We have had some testing, but tell me what your predictions are in any case, and also whether you think Ferrari have made the right decision by getting rid of Mattia Binotto as team principal. I'll be hanging out with you all in the comments once the video goes live, and until then, enjoy your racing.